More evidence that Black Lives Matter is pro-terrorist, and Larry Elder makes the connection to the Obama administration. You're going to want to see those videos. Karine Jean-Pierre and the Biden White House, they hate having a free press. We'll tell you all about it. Plus, a gay comedian in Israel tells it like it is about supporting Palestine and gay rights. You can't do both. All that coming up right now. Well, we had a great moment in the White House press briefing this week when a New York Post reporter called Karine Jean-Pierre out on the fact that she won't call on him ever. And look what happened.
All right, you haven't called on me in 2 seasons, Karine.
And not calling on you today. Go ahead.
Go ahead, you should be ashamed of that.
Go ahead.
That shows
Go ahead.
disrespect to a free and
Go
independent
ahead.
media. It's black.
I'm going to quote.
I'm one of our largest and most widely read newspapers, Karine. That shows contempt for a free and independent press.
Go ahead. I'm calling on somebody who I haven't called in a long time as well. Go ahead.
Thanks.
All right,
The smug, all the smug, so much smug. Yeah, that was the New York Post. Steve Nelson is the name of the reporter. He's the White House press reporter there. And they haven't called on the New York Post. New York Post, one of the oldest newspapers in America, founded by Alexander Hamilton. You know, the left, the Democrats, liberals, they love Alexander Hamilton when he's a Puerto Rican actor rapping on a Broadway stage. But, you know, they really should read about Alexander Hamilton, the real life guy. They'd be very disconcerted about how Republican and conservative and pro-America he was. So the New York Post, founded by Alexander Hamilton, and also, by the way, it's got the fourth widest circulation in the country, right behind USA Today, Wall Street Journal, and New York Times. There's the New York Post. So why don't they get called on? Why? Because they're actually reporting on the crimes of the Biden family and the crimes of this White House. They, of course, had the Hunter Biden laptop story that this White House, back when they were just a presidential campaign, assured America that that story was Russian disinformation. And if you repeated it, you were part of Vladimir Putin's propaganda machine. It was election meddling, that laptop story. Now, of course, we know the truth. We knew the truth then. But the New York Times and the Washington Post and any of the legitimate news agencies in this country, they refuse to acknowledge it. Of course, the story was true. The New York Post keeps reporting the truth. They should win Pulitzers for reporting the truth. And what is this Biden White House doing? They're not only ignoring them, they're trying to silence them. They're trying to squash their ability to cover this White House. And you just saw her smug response. Yeah, I'm not going to call on you. I'm going to continue not calling on you, because they're reporting the truth. Imagine Richard Nixon refusing to call on the Washington Post reporter when they were covering Watergate. What do you think the response of the other reporters would be, let alone the American people? Every single reporter in that room should stand shoulder to shoulder in support of the New York Post. In fact, every single time she calls on them, if they had any integrity, if they actually cared about the First Amendment and freedom of speech and freedom of the press, which they don't, they just pretend to. If they actually cared about it, every time Karine Jean-Pierre called on them, they would say, you know what, I'll hold off and I'll let my colleague, Mr. Nelson from the New York Post, ask a question instead. That's what they should do, but they won't. Speaking of free speech, let's move on now to the university campuses of America. As you know, Ivy League colleges and pretty much every major college and university in this country have put out statements in support of the Nazis in the Middle East. That would be Hamas and the Palestinian effort. They're completely equivocal when it comes to saying something in support of Israel. If they say anything in support of Israel, it's within the context or frame of, well, we abhor violence of all times, of all nature. We hate terrorism going on over there of all kinds, which is their way of saying, you know, the Israelis are guilty as well. Well, it's every college campus except one major university, the University of Florida. The president of that university is former U.S. Senator Ben Sasse. And he put out a statement that is worth hearing in its entirety, and I'm going to read it to you. You can read along. I will not tiptoe around this simple fact that what Hamas did is evil, and there is no defense for terrorism. Period. That's great. That's all you need to say. He went on. This shouldn't be hard. Sadly, too many people in elite academia have been so weakened by their moral confusion that when they see videos of raped women, hear of a beheaded baby, or learn of a grandmother murdered in their home, the first reaction of some is to provide context and try to blame the raped women, beheaded baby, or the murdered grandmother. In other grotesque cases, they express simple support for the terrorists. And that's exactly what you've seen. Not only on college campuses, not only in Ivy League universities, but actually in the corridors of Congress where Ben Sasse used to work on a daily basis. This thinking isn't just wrong, it's sickening, it's dehumanizing, it's beneath people called to educate our next generation of Americans. I am thankful to say I haven't seen examples of that here at UF, either from our faculty or our student body. As for us, our educational mission here begins with the recognition and explicit acknowledgement of human dignity, the same human dignity that Hamas terrorists openly scorn. Every single human life matters. We are committed to that truth, and we will tell that truth. Did you know that Harvard began as a school of divinity? Yeah. Harvard, the oldest college here in America. In the colonies, in the Massachusetts colony, when Harvard started, it actually began as a school to teach ministers and reverends and pastors. The main courses were about the Bible and faith and Christianity. Boy, they've come a long way, haven't they? In the coming days, Ben Sasse says in his letter, it is possible that anti-Israel protests will come to UF's campus. I have told our police chief and administration that this university always has two foundational commitments. We will protect our students and we will protect speech. This is always true. Our Constitution protects the rights of people to make abject idiots of themselves. But I also want to be clear about this. We will protect our Jewish students from violence. If anti-Israel protests come, we will absolutely be ready to act if anyone dares to escalate beyond peaceful protest. Speech is protected. Violence and vandalism are not. He goes on, and you should read the entire thing yourself. But it's nice to see such stalwart support, not just for the real victims in this terrorist attack and condemnation for the Nazi-like perpetrators, but it's also nice to see a forthright support for free speech at a time when university presidents are shutting down speeches by people who dare to step up and say, you know, men are men and women are women, and women's private spaces should be protected. And innocent women should not be exposed to male genitalia without their consent and against their will. That kind of speech is seen as dangerous and violent and has to be silenced and shut down, as we see on a daily basis now on American college campuses. Here we've got a man who is literally saying, all right, listen, you have every right to be an idiot and speak out and support the terrorists who just murdered and raped innocent people and kidnapped those that survived. You have every right to support them. We will allow it because we embrace free speech. Boy, imagine if every college was run like the University of Florida. I'm not a huge Gators fan, but this week I might have to take them. Who are they playing? LSU? Yeah, that actually, I think it's LSU. I'm not sure. It's the SEC. It's not real football anyway. Speaking of free speech, let's move on to Israel, where our friend Dave Rubin drew our attention to a comedian, a gay Jewish comedian on the ground in Israel, had some observations about this strange phenomenon of pro-LGBTQ plus pro-Palestinian protesters. That's right. They're protesting in favor of Hamas and at the same time in favor of gay rights. And if you're confused, well, just imagine how this guy feels.
I think it's a little ironic that the people who seem to be defending Hamas online are also the ones they'd be most likely to kill. Oh, no, I'm sure the Islamic terrorists would love you, queer intellectual feminist. We're freedom fighters. They're fighting for their land, and I'm fighting for my right to purple hair. What the It's like a girl in a really toxic relationship. I know you don't like him because he kidnaps and murders people, but trust me, when I'm alone with him, he is such a sweetheart. I'm sorry, if your reaction to people being slaughtered, beheaded, raped, and burned alive isn't complete and utter disgust and horror, if your reaction is, yeah, but I mean, why? See it from their perspective. You need to get your head checked, okay? I'm sure Jeffrey Dahmer had a rough childhood. That doesn't mean I empathize with him. If you want to free Palestine from Hamas.
Hell, I mean, that pretty much says it all, doesn't it? Listen, we believe in equal time here. Obviously, this program tries to show all sides of an issue. We like to report, and you decide. So now it's time to show you the most popular gay Palestinian stand-up comic. He performs on a regular basis there in Gaza, Hamas approved. Let's see his response. All right, let's go right to it. Let's have Abdul, the gay stand-up comic, openly gay in Palestine. What's happening? Where's the oh, that's right. Oh, that's right. You can't be openly gay in the Gaza territory. All those pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas protesters like to call Gaza a open-air prison, right? Where they've had self-rule for nearly 2 decades now. When the people of Gaza, the Palestinians, decided to vote for their leadership, they voted in Hamas, the terror organization, and you can't be openly gay there. You can over in the oppressive, totalitarian apartheid state of Israel. That's why we were able to show you that stand-up comic. He's openly gay. He performs. He's allowed to do that. He's tolerated. He's celebrated. But you can't do that. I mean, we tried to be fair and balanced. We tried to give equal time. If there is an openly gay member of Hamas who is a stand-up comedian who would like to respond to that video, we would welcome it. Please send it our way. We'll put it out there. In the meantime, as usual, the Babylon Bee said it best. Their latest headline: Palestinian flag outside Rashida Tlaib's office, seen throwing pride flag off the roof. God bless you, Babylon Bee. Sometimes you got to laugh. But yeah, maybe that's what happened to the openly gay Palestinian stand-up comic in the Gaza territory there. He would have joined us and brought us a video, but he was killed by the Hamas government, for being gay. All right, moving on to Black Lives Matter. We've been discussing the unbelievable, despicable, disgusting support that Black Lives Matter has shown to the Palestinians, to Hamas, to the Nazi murderers. And a lot of people are like, wow, I'm shocked. My head is just blown. Who knew, right? Who knew? Well, we knew. Here's Patrisse Cullors. She is the founder of Black Lives Matter. And this is a video from a handful of years ago where she explained exactly where Black Lives Matter stood when it came to Israel and the Palestinian people.
The other thing I'll say is Palestine is our generation South Africa. And if we don't step up boldly and courageously to end the imperialist project that's called Israel, we're doomed. And
end the imperialist project known as Israel. End the project. Now, this is a nation state that was recognized in 1948 by the United Nations. The United States of America, by the way, in one of our greatest moments of the 20th century. And that's saying something because we had some great moments in the 20th century. We were the first country to acknowledge their right to exist, the state of Israel. Good on Harry Truman for doing that. There was a time when Republicans and Democrats could agree on such things. When Patrisse Cullors, the founder and spokesperson for Black Lives Matter, says that we need to end Israel, what does that mean exactly? Because the only way to end Israel as we know it is to remove the Jewish people from that area. And I don't think they're going to go voluntarily. So basically, we're talking about the next Holocaust. That's what this person is calling for when she says end the experiment. And honestly, when I hear this, I mean, it's great to have moral clarity about who these people are. When they tell you who they are, pay attention and listen. I'm frankly more freaked out by the people cheering her and applauding her.
And I think that I had learned about Palestine for a long time. I had known about it, been wanting to travel, and I was really, really grateful when the Dream Defenders asked me to come on the delegation. But nothing would have prepared me for the level of militarization and the level of violence that we would witness those 10 days inside of Palestine.
Really, the level of violence. I'd love her to describe exactly what that violence looked like. Did it look like the beheading of infants? Did it look like raping women and then murdering them? Raping them next to the murdered corpse of their husband or boyfriend? Is that what it looked like? Just curious. I'm curious if the violence that she experienced in Gaza or the West Bank resembled the murder of over 800 innocent people, including Americans, and the capturing of hostages. I don't think it did. I think we would have heard about that.
Nothing would have prepared me for the ways in which we witness people's terror. People live in terror on a daily basis. And nothing would have prepared me for how much clarity I would have on why we have to be a part of Palestinian solidarity.
That's who Black Lives Matter is. That's who they've been from the beginning, but they were used as a political pawn to get rid of Donald Trump in 2020 because, well, it was useful. If you voted for Trump, it meant you were a racist. That was the message that needed to be amplified. And I guess it worked. But make no mistake, any politician now who continues to support Black Lives Matter, any corporation who continues to give money to this organization, they were bullied into it back in 2020. And I guess we can forgive them for not knowing any better. They should have, but okay. But any corporation now who continues to give money to this fraudulent, evil organization, no more apologies, no more grace. You know who else has had enough of Black Lives Matter? I mean, listen, he had enough of Black Lives Matter when it started. It's Larry Elder. Larry Elder gives us a bit of moral clarity here on a regular basis with regard to this fraudulent group. But he appeared on Eric Bolling's program on Newsmax, and I'm just going to let Larry Elder take it from here.
All right, let's bring in Republican 2024 presidential candidate Larry Elder to react. Larry, I wanted to bring you in to talk about this Patrisse Cullors comment. We're now finding in 2015, Patrisse Cullors, who's one of the co-founders of BLM, saying that she was calling for the end of Israel. The reason why it matters is because BLM tweeted a horrifying picture of Hamas kind of paratrooping and killing Israelis. There it is right there. Larry, what's going on behind the scenes at BLM?
Well, Eric, thank you for having me. BLM is a morally bankrupt organization, and it's been so from its very inception. Let's remember, right now, today, racism, anti-Black racism, has never been less significant. In fact, the demand for racism is exceeding the supply, and that's why an organization like Black Lives Matter took the death of Trayvon Martin to start itself, even though the man who shot and killed Trayvon Martin was found, Eric, not guilty by a jury. A Black alternate said he would have found him not guilty, and race never came up. Fast forward to George Floyd. The lead prosecutor, who was a Black man, never even implied that Derek Chauvin did what he did because of George Floyd's race. In fact, the lead prosecutor bent over backwards in his opening statement to say the police in general were not on trial. This individual is on trial, and Derek Chauvin was never charged with a hate crime. Yet that resulted in 4 months, and beginning in May of 2020, 25 people killed, 2,000 officers injured, at least $2 billion in insured property damage, and maybe another $1 billion or $2 billion in uninsured property damage. Now you have all these statements made by people like Patrisse Cullors indicating Black Lives Matter's anti-Semitism. Unfortunately, Eric, anti-Semitism within the Black community is not uncommon. You've got Jesse Jackson referring to Jews as Jaime and New York as Jaime Town. You have Al Sharpton in the middle of the 1991 Crown Heights riots saying that the Jews want to pin their yarmulkes on, come over to my house and let's get it on. The Anti-Defamation League has documented over the years that the anti-Semitism rate in the Black community is anywhere from 2 to 4 times higher than among non-Black people. Louis Farrakhan. And you can't even get the Congressional Black Caucus to announce Louis Farrakhan. And remember that famous photograph that emerged after Barack Obama left the White House with a smiling Senator Obama standing next to a smiling Louis Farrakhan? And it didn't come out until almost 8 years or so after Obama left.
You know, we know that early Obama years, Louis Farrakhan was a major influence to young Barack Obama, right?
And his pastor, Jeremiah Wright, was close friends with Louis Farrakhan. We can go on and on and on. This is all, Eric, ignorance. Jews have been friends to Blacks for a very long period of time. My mother grew up in the Jim Crow South. A guy named Julius Rosenwald worked with other Black leaders to found something like 5,000 schools for mostly Black kids in the South. You've got a guy that worked very closely with Thurgood Marshall to win the Brown versus Board of Education. Jews worked very closely with MLK. In the 60s, there were 400 freedom fighters that were trained by civil rights organizations. Half of them were Black, half of them were non-Black. Of the non-Black ones, between 50% and 75% of them were Jews. The famous movie, Mississippi Burning, was based on the death of 3 civil rights workers, 2 of whom were Jews. Jews have been very, very close to Black people. And Eric, when you look at polls about negative stereotypes about Blacks, Jews are the least likely of all religious, ethnic, and racial groups to hold negative stereotypes of Blacks. Yet you have this anti-Semitism within the Black community. It's appalling. It really is. Now, the majority of Blacks are not anti-Semitic, don't get me wrong, but of those who are, it is substantially higher than in the non-Black Gentile community.
Yeah, incredibly important, by the way, for Larry Elder, who is an outspoken commentator and, yes, running for president, although it's a bit of a long shot at this point, for him to call out the leadership of the Black community. This isn't a phenomenon of Black Americans. This is the leadership who find themselves aligned with the Democrats and then find themselves suspicious of, if not outright anti-Semitic, of the Jewish community, not just here at home, but also in Israel. And now we're really seeing it rise to the level after this attack. And Democrats in general should be looking at, I'm Democrat leadership and elected officials, I don't care about them. They're a lost cause. It's about those people who instinctively or reflexively vote Democrat because grandma loved John F. Kennedy, or because you bought into this myth that the Democrats are for the little guy. They're not. Democrats are for the working man. They're not. Democrats are about power, and they're about controlling the little guy and the working man. And look at how it's manifest itself into this. Well, you just heard Larry Elder on fire, detailing point by point the long, sad, sordid history of anti-Semitism. And yes, it really manifests during the Obama years.
Reasons that I think are completely, totally ignorant.
Very quickly, Larry, about a minute or so, you said, and I'm reading your words, demand for racism exceeds supply. Who are the chief purveyors or demanding this racism to spread? Is it white supremacists, or does it happen to be Democrats?
People on the left. The last few years, there have been over 500 fake hate crime allegations from Jussie Smollett to that NASCAR driver who claimed that there was a noose on his gate, to on and on and on. Shows you the demand for racist instances is exceeding the supply.
Yeah, and the only quarrel I would have there with Eric Bolling is when he said, is it white supremacists or is it Democrats? The answer is yes. Yes, that's exactly who it is. The white supremacists who are Democrats. All right, a little bit more about Hamas. Whenever you see, and we'll repeat ourselves a little bit on this program, I've said it a bit this week already. When you see people saying that they are pro-Palestine, they are saying they are pro-Hamas. The two are intertwined because Gaza, the territory that Israel gave back to the Palestinian people and allowed themselves autonomy to vote for their own leadership, when they had the opportunity back in 2005, they voted for Hamas. Hamas is the leadership of choice for the Palestinian people. And Hamas is a Nazi terrorist group who wants to eradicate the Jewish people from the face of the earth, starting with those who are living in the state of Israel. Now, when people are pro-Palestinian, when you see it on college campuses, you see it in your city streets, you'll hear them using rhetoric about occupation. Occupation means the existence of the state of Israel. It has nothing to do with Gaza and the West Bank. It's the entirety of the Israel nation, number one. But number two, you'll also hear these lies that, well, Hamas is more than just this terrorist group. They're actually a charity. They have a charity organization, and they're a government organization, and they're keeping the streets clean, and they're providing free health care. And seriously, you're hearing this stuff, right? So and also you're hearing that Hamas needs aid. The Biden administration gave humanitarian aid to Hamas that had been cut off during the Trump years because the Trump people saw that Hamas was using this so-called humanitarian aid for terrorist acts. So they said, no, you're using our money, U.S. money, to pay to kill Jews in Israel. No, we're cutting you off. Biden then opens up the spigot, and we're funneling our money, our tax dollars, to Hamas under the guise of humanitarian aid. Because, they're there to help them get clean water and a sewage system, right? Well, take a look at this video that Hamas has put out showing exactly what they're doing with the pipes that are used for that so-called clean water and sewage system. Why is there a problem in Hamas right now? Why are children growing up in unsanitary conditions and they don't have drinking water? This is why.
يا قاتلا ما كان قمحي فانيا هيهات يهزم في بنادقنا اليقين جئنا لكم من أرضنا وسمائنا من لج بحر صادحين مكبرين الله أكبر الله أكبر كبروا الله أكبر الله أكبر كبروا سندكهم وفلولهم ونسيء وجها قد وعدنا فاتحين يا ثورة.
Super catchy tune. Why isn't there a good sewage system in Gaza? Why don't children have clean drinking water? Well, because the pipes have all been dug up from the ground and repurposed to be rocket launchers. That's why. It's amazing that they use all that ingenuity and brain power and resourcefulness to kill Jews. Imagine if they actually tried to do something constructive for their own people. Just imagine. The next time you hear that they need foreign aid to be able to help their people, just remember what you just saw. Remember what they're actually spending their time, energy, and money on. We end today with a harrowing story. We end with a father recounting the moment he heard the terrible news that his daughter, who had been taken by the Nazi Hamas terrorists, he learned that his daughter died. And it turns out to have been good news for him. Watch.
They just said, we found Emily. She's dead. And I went, yes! I went, yes, and smiled. Because that is the best news of the possibilities that I knew. That was the best possibility that I was hoping for.
And we actually spoke with one man, originally from Ireland, who was separated from his 8-year-old daughter. She had gone to a sleepover at a friend's house who also lived in the kibbutz. And he described to us the agonizing moment after 2 days of waiting for answers. He was rescued. He finally found out that his 8-year-old daughter, Emily, had been killed.
She was either dead or in Gaza. And if you know anything about what they do to people in Gaza, that is worse than death. That is worse than death. The way they treat you. They'd have no food. They'd have no water. She'd be in a dark room filled with Christ knows how many people and terrified every minute, hour, day, and possible years to come. So death was a blessing, an absolute blessing.
Imagine being a parent and finding out that the death of your little child was the best possible outcome. That's what's happening today on the ground in Israel. And anybody who's out there saying, yes, and but, you've already lost the argument. Fix your broken moral compass, will you? This is real. Thank you so much for watching today. That is it. We've got plenty more to work with on our next program, I assure you. So please like, subscribe, and share. When you share our videos, it makes a huge difference, and we really appreciate it. We're 2 weeks in now, and the exponential growth has been phenomenal. I thank you from the bottom of my heart and all of us here at Town Hall. We will see you next time. Thanks for watching. I'm Larry O'Connor. Is there any other Larry? See you next time.